I'm going to teach you exactly how you should be practicing to go from practice sessions suck and I get a little bit out of them to absolutely nailing it every single time and seeing massive results. When I personally started doing this, I was already at music university, so I was at A level. But then I started doing this, and over the course of one summer holiday break, I got heaps of feedback when I came back, and people said, wow, you're on a totally different level. And to be honest, I was still only practicing less than an hour a day, probably less than a lot of other people at the university. But because of the way that I practiced, it was so efficient and so effective that it made me double, triple the results that I was seeing throughout the term. And I've kept this up. And now, even though I practice a lot less, just because I'm a lot busier, I still get to see the same results that I was seeing throughout my whole first year at uni, which is incredible because I was practicing 3 hours a day back then. And now I might be practicing less than half an hour a day, depending on the day. So, first of all, what is practice? So when we're thinking about practice, we need to be thinking about the purpose of the practice. And the point of the practice is for you to learn things and make hard things easy. That's pretty much it. I don't think you can make an argument that there's any other point to practice. So what we need to be practicing then is we need to account for time that we can learn things and actually implement them into the practice. And then all that we need to be doing is really just making hard things easy. So we need to enforce a lot of things that get it to go quickly from conscious thought into the realm of unconscious thought, and then into the realm of, I can do this while I'm talking. You probably right now can play some scale while you're talking. You could uphold a conversation with me and you could be playing your C major scale. And that's awesome. We want to just transfer more and more and more things into that realm of excellence and just unconscious competence. So one of the things that we need to do that is we need to structure our practice session right. So a lot of advice on the internet, which is just dead wrong, is they'll say, so first we're going to start off by playing something fun. Then once we've played something fun and we're getting into the mood of it, we're going to play something really technical, really difficult. Then we're going to start writing a song. Then we're going to do all of this. And they're trying to condense 50,000 things, unrelated things, into the one practice session. And we want to avoid that like the plague. So the simplest thing to get started and to start thinking about is, what's the end point of the practice session? So if you think to yourself, all right, at the end of this practice session, I want to have achieved this goal, that goal, or I want to have understood and be able to do this one thing, that is awesome. That is perfect. Because when you do that aimless, directionless, I'm going to play something fun, I feel like playing this thing, but it's not really productive, that's how you end up wasting all of your practice time. So you need to have a goal more than you need to have a structure. And so once you've got that goal, you need to start implementing things that lead up to that goal. So as an example, one of my favorite things to do is I'll say, I need to learn this song. I'm going to start by listening to it 20 times. And that is part of the practice session. And during that listening, I'm going to have my bass or my guitar, and I'm going to start figuring things out as I go. So I might figure out on the first time that I listen to it, it's kind of in the key of E, then it moves to like G major halfway through, and then comes maybe does something weird, goes to B flat. I think it might have been E flat. Cool. Second time through, listen to it again, pick up more things. And then eventually you really understand the song. And you're like, great, I have learnt the song. From there, you need to go from learning the song to playing the song. But you can just do that the next day, right? You've already developed all of these ear skills, you've already developed all of these practice techniques. And so the next day you can come back and you say, right, I need to play this song now that I've learnt it. And the way that you do that is, the simple way is you just get a metronome app. You start it out at 1/3 the speed you want to end up with. If you need to go slower, do it. And then every time that you play through the song, you're going to increase it by a couple of BPM. So on my metronome app, it has a feature where I've got it set for 10 minutes. So over the course of 10 minutes, it will triple the initial speed, and then it'll end up pretty much where I want it. So if I want to learn a song that's, let's say, 200 BPM, I'll start the metronome at 70 BPM. Once every 5 seconds or so, it'll raise the BPM by 1 BPM. And so what that means for me is that from the start of the song to the end of the song. Let's say that it's a 32 bar form, could be longer, could be shorter, but that means that realistically, I've probably gone from maybe 70 BPM to like CPM. And especially for technical exercises, this is really important. But what you're doing is you're adding stress. And eventually, you'll probably reach a point where even with those tiny little increments, you'll start to fail and you'll start to struggle. And that's okay. That's the whole point. Because when you reach that point, that's when you've actually learnt the new thing. And so then what I like to do from there is I like to start about 20 BPM slower and go again. And what you'll find is that you can just progressively get further and further along. And you might not hit 100% of the speed on that first session. But then what you do is you just have a quick nap. All right? It sounds silly, but if you have like a quick 20-minute power nap and then you come back to it and you spend another 10 minutes doing it, it will actually do a lot better than if you'd have just tried to beat at it with a hammer. All right? It's like if you opened up your toolbox and you pulled out every single tool that you had, and you had a sledgehammer, you had a mallet, and you had a regular hammer, all that you can do is beat away at that problem. But sometimes what you need is not to just try and destroy it with brute force. Sometimes maybe you need to put a little bit of plaster on there and then try again. Or maybe you need to reinforce certain areas and you come back from it and you say, oh, I actually think that the easiest way for me to do this passage is I should start with my second finger instead of my first finger, or whatever it ends up being. But you'll have a lot more foresight and clarity into how you actually want to do your practice session. So you've done your quick practice session, and now you're at the point where, okay, achieved my goal. This is great. What you're going to do from there is you're going to implement it at your next performance. So you need to be doing performances. This is actually a really important part of practice, because it's one thing to just sit in the bedroom and do this. It's another thing to actually get out there and do it live in front of an audience, you know, probably sweaty, and really get into it. So you need to be implementing all of these things at your performance. Now, if you're doing what I'm doing, which is learning jazz while playing in sort of funk fusion rock bands, you're not going to be able to do absolutely everything all of the time. Like, no way that I'm going to just start playing Autumn Leaves in the middle of solo on a 12-bar blues. It just doesn't work. So what you need to be doing is you need to be taking elements, taking them out, and then inserting them into your play. And what that's doing is it's transferring it from something that you can recreate to something that you can create. So when you're recreating something, it's like you hear something and then you go, oh yeah, I can do that. But when you're creating something, you don't have that template to bounce off. It's what you can actually genuinely call on and do. And the more that you can transfer things like that, so you practice, you learn this new song, you learn this new lick, you learn this new riff, and you learn it super duper fast, the more you can transfer the idea of that into other elements of your playing, the faster that you'll be able to build up that toolbox. And then you'll have a hammer, you'll have a spanner, you'll have all of the tools available at your disposal. You won't need to sort of your neighbor's house and need to borrow a wrench or anything. You'll just have access and it'll be available within your head. And the amazing thing about this is that if you do it in this way, you don't need to revisit a lot of things. So you do slowly degrade over time. That does happen. But the rate at which you do it, if it's like just competence that you can just call on at any time, it's kind of riding a bike. It might take you 5 minutes to figure it out, but only because you spent 5 years learning it as a kid. So with that unconscious competence and with all of that power that you've already dedicated to it, it'll just be locked in your brain. And yes, it will decay over time. You will need to go back about once a year and say, okay, I need to revisit this. But you need to do that like a year, and you don't need to do it every single practice session. And what that means is that you can cut out like the fluff from everyone else's practice session. Now, if you've got more than an hour, let's say that you're like me and you'd like to practice for 2 hours or so, what you do is you break it into 2 50-minute chunks, 20-minute nap in between, and you say, okay, my first goal, work on that goal. Here's my second goal, work on that goal. Third goal, work on that goal. Fourth goal, work on that goal. Have the nap, do the exact same process. And this is a really, really, really effective way. And then, it's Saturday night, whenever the gig is, you get to practice all of those 5 things. You've already laid them out in your head, and you're good to go. You know what you're actually working on. You know the point of that gig beyond just getting out there, getting exposure, and getting paid. I'm James from musicmastery.net. I will see you in the next video.